Well, hey there. So today in this episode, it's another crazy, bumpy Terry ride. I'm kind of, again, all over the place. I'll try to edit some of the crazy out, but not all of it because I know it's just who I am and how I'm handling this whole show. Today I'm talking about the books I published and what it was like adding the complement of having books as part of my business and how idealistic I was when I took it on, what started it, and pretty much the full experience. The prompt is going to be asking you to take a look at where and how in your business could a book, if you haven't written one yet, if you have, then great. How can you stay current with your books, right? A book can actually be a really good marketing tool for your business, for your services. It can also help reinforce your personal brand. It can help you deepen the positioning you have on a service or a model that you're promoting. And these are all really critical ways that you can look at your business and find additional revenue streams. You can also use it as a value add when let's say you're a speaker and you want to have your book given to everyone in the audience. There's a lot of wonderful things you can do regarding adding a book or having a series that helps promote who you are and what you do. And that's what I talk about when I share my goofy experience becoming a writer while I was running my business. And if you want, go on Amazon and type Terry Pappy and you'll find the books that I've written. I definitely have not been able to retire on my royalties, nor will I ever. Oh my God. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the show and my goofiness. Thanks for being here. Here it is. Welcome to my Solopreneur life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Today I'm going to talk about my books. Yes, I thought I was the you-know-what when I decided to publish my first book. I'm not going to get into every single little story about each book, but I'll try to break it up into segments because the first book was more of a, hey, can she write kind of a thing. But I also had to really think about what and why I was writing. Now, hearkening back to prior episodes where I talked about my choice as far as a career and getting that education, I was looking at two different routes after high school. One was the business of art, which was commercial art school. That's the one I chose, obviously. But I also had a lot of strengths and was getting recognized for my writing when I was in the last few years of high school. And so I did consider journalism. But at the time, I think just the experience I had going to commercial art prep school with the Art Institute of Pittsburgh was such a positive experience. It was like, okay, no decision. But there was always this kind of yearning to be a better writer, to see what my writing could do. The beautiful thing is it's a wonderful complement to the business of art. So being able to not only do the design, the business strategy, all the things that come to play when you're doing any kind of communications for business, you need copy. Copy is so important. You can have advertising without any graphics, any photos, any music, anything. If you have strong copy, it will be a slam dunk every time. So I wanted to spend an episode talking about copy, talking about messaging, and talking about using writing skills to actually create other, or additional is probably a better way to put it, revenue streams in your business as a solopreneur. As you're going along and having all this experience, whether you're in your mid-career and you're starting your business as a consultant or a speaker or author, and you want to start leveraging your writing, you have a lot of experience, real world experience, professional experience, to speak to and write about and create training, instructional information, inspirational information. It's not a bad idea to consider, how can I take my worldly knowledge in my career so far and bring it to bear from the standpoint of creating a piece of written material. And so when you look at the longevity that you've had, the value and in the experiences that you've had, and your ability to create solutions, real world solutions that people need, consider putting that out there in the form of copy / educational information. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do it by starting a really powerful blog, writing articles on LinkedIn, doing a podcast like this one. Now, granted, that's more auditory than it is the written word. I want to focus mainly on the written word. Obviously, you can do downloadable ebooks. You can do real books. And it's interesting because I run into a lot of people, and I've had clients that the first thing out of their mouth is, oh, I can't write. Oh, I don't have time to sit down and write a book. They just think that it's such a huge undertaking. And depending on how you approach it, it can be, obviously. The genre I'm speaking to is more nonfiction, learning, inspirational, educational, expert type books versus a novel, a mystery, a memoir, and so on. I'm going to come back to this toward the end with a prompt, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey / experience being a writer while I was running my business. Here's my synopsis of the writing work that I did. And it just shows my idealistic approach when I first published my first book. And what I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to make this like my business. And this is great. I'm going to do this. And I didn't realize how naive I was. That you just can't ride along on talent, pure talent. Here's the story. In 2004, my husband Chuck passed away after a long illness. We had a wonderful relationship, albeit the illness was a big part of it. It was an exceptional relationship experience that I had with Chuck. As I was starting to think about writing, and I remember after he passed away and the dust settled as far as all of the post funeral and all that stuff, I found his journal that he had kept while he was going through probably more of his serious treatments for his cancer. And in it, he wrote just 14 entries. He was trying to process a lot of the emotion and the turmoil he was experiencing and just get his thoughts on paper, which was a suggestion I gave him. He wasn't really a writer and was kind of girly to have a journal and stuff, but he took it on. He was so open to anything that could help him and to help us work our way through it. When I found this, I was like, this is really incredible. Obviously, it was very emotional for me to find it. And because he had done it a couple years prior and I forgot about it because of everything else we were dealing with. And so after he passed away, I could not find a salve. I couldn't find a book or anything online that would help soothe me or that I could relate to from the standpoint of how I was grieving. I was really looking for a love story. I really wanted to understand, is there anybody else out there that went through what I went through? Not the turmoil of the illness and everything that we did on that regard, but the fact that he was my husband, he was the love of my life. I mean, after he passed away, I was like, I'm done, right? I had the best and that's all there is to it. So I wanted to read a love story. That's really what I was looking for because I was having a hard time finding it. There's all these books on grief and the 7 stages of grief. And I'm like, yeah. I'm telling you, when you're in that level of grief, it's remarkable what your brain does. I found his journal. I was very inspired to tell our story because I couldn't find one. That was my first book. It was a memoir. It was called 14 Days Loving Life with the Love of My Life, which really described how I felt and what I wanted to express. And yes, you can still buy it today, believe it or not. And I published that in 2007. and I self-published it through Author House. Now, as I was going through that experience, I was like struck by the idea of I can be a writer and I can do this writing. Now, did I want to write all these memoirs about my experience? No, of course not. That was kind of like a salve. And as I said, I wanted to share our love story. And I even won an honorable mention for that book from Writer's Digest. I forgot about that. That's kind of cool. So I went through the process of self-publishing. I designed the cover. I laid the whole book out. I did everything. It was a big learning experience as far as how to do the actual compilation of not just writing, but I got an editor to go through it because you have to have a second set of eyes, hopefully someone who's educated and skilled at doing the proper type of editing. And so I finished that, did the publishing, and then it was like crickets. But I never really put a lot of emphasis into promoting it, marketing it, or any of that. I didn't even think about that at the time. For me, it was more about the project. It was about bringing the story to life, putting it out there. If one person read it and was soothed by it or inspired by it or just felt or experienced our love story, that was my box that I wanted to check. And I haven't really sold that many because I really don't market it. I think the funny thing is people that do buy it, and at least that I find out, because it's kind of difficult to find out who buys your books on Amazon, they basically do it because they've met me. And for some reason, they go on Amazon and, when I mention I've written a couple of books and they go on and they find it and the other ones that I've done as well. I'm laughing because it's like I marvel at how naive I was about becoming a writer. Well, meanwhile, I'm still starting my own business, my creative agency. It was around that time. So I had a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom. And so I caught the bug about, hey, I can actually write and publish a book. So the next thing was about doing something more focused in the instructional and inspirational creativity. I created this model that kind of combined all of the processes and training I'd received around brainstorming, creativity. I had come up with this model that leveraged all of these resources that I'd used, that I brought into my business, that I would use with clients, that I would do for my own personal growth. And I came up with this model called Compass Playbook. I came up with a workbook and I laid it all out, created all these, what I called plays, which were little templates that you could use to make lists. You could do mind mapping. You could draw like a storyboard. You could do all different kinds of these little exercises. And they were all triggered by prompts. And this was really the beginning of my prompt habit. And you know about my prompts because I put them in every episode of my Solopreneur life. And so I created this workbook, got it published, and I did the same thing, did self-publishing through Amazon. And so I had the workbook version, which was like 8 by 10. And then I have the companion, which is essentially the copy part. You don't necessarily do the exercises in the book. So the first one's like a workbook where you do all the exercises in the book. And then the companion just has the instructions and the prompts. And then you can use a sketchbook, a journal, a drawing tablet, whatever you feel like doing. If you bought the workbook, you'd have to buy a new one for every time you go through all of the prompts. That was my logic at the time, right? But what was really cool about this was I was so excited and had gotten early interest in it. I decided to do workshops. I called them Write Shops, W-R-I-T-E, because there was a lot of writing involved. And I had participated in a lot of writing workshops where you're working on a writing project and you go in a workshop and it's usually facilitated and so on. And I was really intrigued by that model. So I took my Compass Playbook and I created these write shops, and then I marketed them locally when I lived in Orlando, and I'd rent space and I'd invite people in. If I was doing something like that today, it would be handled very differently. But the cool thing about it was I actually had some nice write shops that I had people come in and I got to facilitate them and hone those skills, which I really enjoyed. And so the live experience was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work though, too, and not really that much of a moneymaker because I never planned, and this harkens back to what I was saying at the beginning of this episode, is you've got to have some sort of structure, almost like a mini business, when you decide to create some sort of asset that's meant to create either passive income or just another revenue source in your business. Because otherwise, you're going to just create the asset and then it's just going to sit there and possibly sell one or two or three. Now, most of these assets, since we're talking about books or that small asset as far as the deliverable, they're going to sell anywhere from $5 to $25, depending on what they're buying, whether it's a hardback or whether it's a Kindle or what have you. Thinking about the bigger picture is so important. And I really want to emphasize the importance of, it's great to have an idea for a book. It's great to have the intention of having something augment your consulting business, your speaking business, whatever you're doing as a solopreneur. However, make sure that you're treating it like a little business. It's great to have the asset, but you've got to have some sort of marketing plan. I never made any money to speak of from the books I created. This is partly my temperament and just what I enjoy about my creativity and having a project. And it's a great thing because I'm like a machine when it comes to producing and completing projects. But I completely fall down the hill backwards when it comes to marketing because I still to this day struggle with self-promotion. Even talking about my books right now is making me feel uncomfortable because I'm like, yeah, I have like 6 books on Amazon and like they hardly sell. Like, well, Terry, do something about that. But I'm so busy doing like my core client work that it's sidelined. Hey, I told you I'd be very authentic in this show. You're getting to hear all the dirt, let me tell you. That was Compass Playbook. I did that for several years. And yes, you can still get those on Amazon. It's like I'm going to be dead and gone and they're going to be sitting there on Amazon and it's like, who the hell's Terry Pappy? The absurdity of it all is just, it's not lost on me, believe me. My final attempt at trying to create some sort of book asset that could bring in, not just have additional revenue, but also be kind of like what I did with Compass Playbook, be a way for me to position myself as I don't want to say educator, but like a resource for approaches to the business of communicating. Okay. I came up with this brand, if you will, called The Confident Entrepreneur. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to write all these series of books under the Confident Entrepreneur moniker. And it's going to be about all the aspects that people need to understand around communicating in business. So I'm like, I'm going to do logo design. I'm going to do website. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Selling, marketing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oops, marketing. Yeah. My last episode, I talk a lot about that. So that's why you got the eye roll there. I was all revved up about it, right? It's another creative project. Yeah, I can do this on the side while I'm serving my clients. Bop, bop, bop. It can be like a passion project. So, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm outside my body just laughing at how ridiculous I am sometimes. So I go and I create these books. I start writing them. And they're a lot shorter. They're around 30,000 words versus like 70, which I think is what I did in the memoir. And Compass was a one-off because it was more of a workbook. It wasn't necessarily a high word count. And as a writer, you'll know that your word count matters. They were about between 25 and 30,000 words for the manuscript, and had an editor go through them again. And I interspersed stories, personal stories, just like I am in this show, talking a lot, although I'm really talking a lot about my stuff in this first season. The first one was The Confident Entrepreneur Guide to Logo Design. And so Sorry, I'm just cracking myself up. It's so funny. And that was actually a really good book, which is really interesting because it addressed a very fundamental aspect that so many new solopreneurs get hung up on. And that's, what does my logo look like? And I want to design my logo and blah, blah, blah. In that particular guide, I walk through how to approach it. And I honestly, I haven't gone back and read it in a while, but it may actually be a little dated from the standpoint of the resources that were available that you could tap back then when I published it, which I think was like 2012 or something like that. The second one I wrote, now remember, I had a whole list of topics that I was going to write a guide for. And I was so ambitious. I was so like, yeah, I'm going to do this. This is great. Give me writing projects to work on because I loved writing and I could just like sit and write for hours every day. The second one was The Confident Entrepreneur Guide to Selling. That was my last book that I published. That is a good book. I highly recommend. If you really are uncomfortable selling, and here I am pimping myself out, very uncomfortable, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that was probably my best book because sales is such a challenge for solopreneurs. And when there's so many marketing training / techniques that are being and have been promoted through social media for people to learn how to sell better, learn how to close that client, learn how to have those conversations and say this and don't say that. And oh my gosh, it's like, are you kidding me right now? And the funny thing is, when I look at myself, when I throw that mirror in front of me and I say that I just don't like self-promotion, I'm very bad at marketing my own business, but yet I'm a really good salesperson because when I get on the phone and I have a conversation with someone, I get to the heart of the matter. And my intention is that I really want to help them. I remember I had this one friend, Robert Urban, back in Orlando, and this was years ago. And I would come to these moments in my business and I'd be like, I'm so frustrated. I want to do this or I want to grow there. And I want to, very idealistic in my approach to business because I just had no real business training. I was just kind of winging it as I went along. And he used to say, you know what, Terry, you know what your problem is? And I said, what? And he goes, your heart is too big for your business. And I wasn't sure at the time how to take that. And Robert knew me pretty good, and he had heard me blather on about my woes and my issues around the struggles I had from time to time with getting clients or working with trouble clients. And that really stuck with me. Here it is, probably 15 plus years later. I still remember that moment. I remember where we were. We were walking down the sidewalk in Winter Park, and we had just had lunch and had a pretty good conversation about business, about marketing, about all of that together, because he was also I think at the time he was a solopreneur. And when he said that to me, it was just like, I wasn't sure if it was a slam, which wasn't his style, or if it was like hard truth, which I think was more his style. But I took it two ways. One, if the first reaction was I took it as criticism, like, oh, I'm just a bleeding heart when it comes to getting business or running my business. And then I thought, you know what? The more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, I want my heart to be bigger than my business. And to this day, I still stick with that sentiment because I would rather do free consulting and help people and just try to have those heart-to-heart talks with people about their business if it's going to help move the needle. I'm not out there to transact. I'm not out there to get another client or close another deal. It's just not how I'm wired. I mean, like, I can feel that at my core that that's not how I'm wired. And anyone who is listening to this show, who has worked with me, who has spent any time with me, understands that. They understand where I'm coming from. They understand how I'm wired. And has that detracted from my ability to have a really big business? Maybe. Has it impeded my more legitimate success cycles? Possibly. I don't know. But one of the beautiful things about being a solopreneur is you can run your business how you want to run it. You can infuse as much or as little of your heart, your personality, your experiences into those engagements. Depending on what your intention is around your solopreneur business, you can decide not only how you want to show up, but how you actually want to serve and help people. So, didn't mean to get all philosophical there. Where was I? I was talking about sales in my last book. Okay, so that is my experience with writing, with publishing, with attempting to become a quote unquote professional writer. And here's what I'm going to say, and I will be talking more in depth about if you want to take on writing a book or doing any kind of series of guides or anything similar to what I've obviously had experience doing myself. I will be putting out some good content around how to approach that and what to do with it. And what I learned that I'm going to recommend that you don't do or do instead. The idea around creating these books, and I've worked with a lot of professional speakers for many years, from like 2016 until through the pandemic. I worked a lot, almost, I don't want to say exclusively, but pretty close with professional speakers. Most of these folks were consultants that did speaking. A few of them only did speaking. They were very active. That's how they earned their living. They were traveling every week. They were doing association presentations, keynotes. But most speakers at the time were terrible marketers. That's a club I founded, by the way. I know I keep poking myself about being a bad marketer when actually I probably am a pretty good marketer. But anyway, I'm sorry for being all over the place. And so a lot of them would write a book, which is great. And the cool thing about a speaker writing a book is they can use it as a leave behind for the audience. So this was a powerful tool for a speaker to have a book that they could add into the package when they were negotiating their keynote fees, travel expenses, etc. They could have X amount of books as leave behinds for the audience participants. And what's great about the book is if it's used in a way that promotes other services in your business or an extension of some sort of agreement, or if it reinforces the message that you're putting out there, a book can be an incredibly powerful tool. But mainly it is a marketing tool. I know that there may be people that will comment otherwise because there are exceptions to this, but you won't get rich just writing books, okay? Believe me, my Amazon payouts will show exactly that, because the royalties are very low and you have to sell a truckload of books to make any money. Even if you go the traditional route through a publisher, they'll give you an advance, but they rely on you to do the marketing. Sorry, I'm getting into the house of publishing. For the prompt, what I want to share with you is that incorporating some sort of literature, ideally in the form of a book where someone can download it, buy it on Amazon or whatever their book thing is, and can refer it, can review it, can interact with it. If it ties into your business in some way, whether it's a form of a gateway drug, meaning it's a way for people to initially get to know you, initially try out your model, your framework, your teachings, and then take the next step with you, which is like maybe subscribing to your service, hiring you as a consultant, hiring you as a trainer, hiring you as a speaker, whatever those things are, that can be a valuable tool. It also can get inserted along the journey for the customer. So if you have an engagement, the book can be part of your maintenance, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can deploy books in particular in your business for not only more texture in how you can provide value, but also an additional revenue stream. Granted, it'll be a small one, but if you write enough books, which was my intention around the Confident Entrepreneur series, you could actually create multiple revenue streams for yourself. I am actually considering looking at publishing another series of books. I'm on the fence. I chose to do this podcast instead because I still have to run my business and serve my clients. But the last book I published was in 2013, and that's that Guide to Selling, which I think that if you have any challenges around sales, that's actually a good book. I will kind of pat myself on the back for that one. Take a look at where you could create an asset, such as a book, somewhere in your business. How can it help promote you? How can it help close a gap or get a prospective customer who might not be ready for you to be ready for you? There's so many different ways you can look at book writing as far as adding it to your business repertoire. The actual book writing part, I'm going to be spending time on helping you with that later. If you need help more immediately, you know how to get a hold of me, right? So we can just talk about whatever you're doing. In the beginning, don't stop yourself by just saying, I'm a bad writer, or I don't know how to write, or I don't know how to start or take on this project. I'll just hire a ghostwriter. I'll hire it out. I will recommend, if you are at all able, it's best if you write it yourself. With the tools we have available today, the AI tools in particular, there's a lot of ways you can be more efficient. But if you really want your book to have meat, if you really want it to be a true expression of what you have to offer, I highly recommend that you do the writing and not a ghostwriter. Believe me, ghostwriters are great. The good ones are very expensive, first of all. Second of all, I would, if you're looking at a ghostwriter, if you're prejudging your ability to write, I would definitely consider doing a book at all if you're going to farm it out. I know I'm kind of taking a hard line on that, but I really believe that there's books in everybody. Everybody has a story to tell. And I think that we just get too in our heads and too self-critical about our ability to do so, because it is an undertaking when you first take it on. But there's too many resources that can help you get there that are available today. So that's the prompt for today, is to take a look at your business, how you're serving, where could a book or a series of books or some type of tool like that help spread your brand, support your mission, what you're about, and really give a lot more people access to what you have to offer, just in a simple book form. So I hope that's helpful, and thanks for bumping along with me in this another ride with Terry in one of her crazy episodes where she's kind of all over the place. So I do appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next show. Take care. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt. If this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done, because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.